If you're watching this right now, don't just scroll past. Listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you isn't a story, it's not a script, and it's definitely not a joke. My name is Andrei Volkov. I'm a cosmonaut, or at least I was before all this happened. For years, I trained for the kind of missions people only dream about. Long months in simulators, endless physical endurance tests, psychological trials, everything that could prepare a man to survive in the harsh vacuum of space. And I thought I was ready for anything: mechanical failures, radiation storms, even the possibility of never coming back. But I wasn't ready for them. I wasn't ready for the moment I realized something out there was watching us, following us, and finally taking me. It started on the third week of our mission aboard the orbital station. I remember staring out of the observation module, just trying to relax, when I noticed a flicker of light moving against the stars. At first, I thought it was just a piece of space debris catching the sunlight, but debris doesn't move like that. This thing shifted directions, accelerated, then slowed down as if it was deliberately scanning us. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I didn't report it right away. But I kept watching night after night until even my commander started noticing it too. "It's just a reflection, Andre," he said, but his voice betrayed doubt. A week later, I woke up strapped into my sleeping bag, and the station felt different. Not mechanically, not physically. There was just a pressure in the air, a strange silence even the hum of the life support systems couldn't cover. Then, through the small circular window, I saw it again. This time closer. It was a shape, not a point of light, metallic, curved, like nothing built by human hands. It didn't belong to the International Space Station fleet, or any craft I'd ever studied. It hovered without sound. No thrusters, no solar panels, just a smooth body with faint pulses of light running along its surface like veins. I froze, barely able to breathe, and then it blinked. I swear to you, the lights on its hull dimmed and brightened in a rhythm, almost like it was trying to communicate. I pressed my helmet to the glass, heart pounding. The next moment, everything in the module went dark. The systems shut down completely. Lights, monitors, even my wrist computer. Total silence, except for the sound of my own panicked breathing. I tried to call mission control, but the comms were dead. That's when the walls themselves began to glow faintly, as if the station was being scanned from the outside. A low vibration passed through my bones, and suddenly I was weightless in a way I'd never felt before. It wasn't just microgravity, it was like my body wasn't connected to the ship anymore, like something had separated me from everything physical. The next thing I remember is blinding light. It wasn't like sunlight or artificial LEDs. It was pure white, penetrating, endless. I couldn't see the station anymore, couldn't see Earth below. My body was floating or maybe suspended, but I wasn't in my suit anymore. I don't know how, but I was stripped of it, though I could still breathe. My skin prickled with cold, and yet I wasn't suffocating. I looked around and realized I was inside something. A chamber, spherical, with walls that shimmered like liquid metal. Shapes moved at the edges of my vision. Tall, slender figures, their outlines bending and warping as if reality itself couldn't decide what they were. I tried to shout, but no sound left my throat. My body was rigid, paralyzed, except for my eyes. The figures came closer, and I saw their faces, or at least what resembled faces. No mouths, no noses, only vast black eyes that seemed to swallow all light. They didn't touch me. They didn't need to. I felt their presence inside my skull, their thoughts pressing against mine. Not words, not even emotions, just raw intent, impossible to resist. And in that moment, I understood one thing with terrifying clarity. I wasn't there first. It took me a long time after they left me in that chamber to realize movement was possible again. At first it felt like time had been poured into me and then frozen, each second a viscous thing I could only observe. When motion returned, it was subtle, a rotation, a drift, and with it came a flood of images and sensations not my own. The beings didn't speak. They projected. I saw flashes of my childhood home in Samara, my father's hands covered in grease, the first time I tasted black bread on shift duty, the exact tilt of my wife's head when she said she'd wait for me. They sifted through memory as if sorting samples, pulling threads, examining textures, and every time they touched a memory I felt naked, like someone had turned a light on in a room I thought was private. They were curious, clinical, and unhurried, nothing like the monsters of late-night shows. One of them, if I can call it that, lingered on the image of the launch pad. For a moment I felt the rumble of the rockets again, the vibration through my boots, the acrid smell of fuel. Then the scene changed and I was back in the chamber watching a tiny replica of Earth spin, oceans shining, the polar caps a thin, fragile halo. They showed me other things too, schematics of orbital mechanics but arranged in geometries that made my training look like children's scribbles, equations that bent space on the page as I watched, a diagram of the station with an extra line, a corridor I knew did not exist. Fear rose, not of them but of the knowledge that the world I trusted was a thinner fabric than I'd believed. I tried to force sound from my throat, to cough, to make any noise. Instead, a pressure built behind my eyes and a single word, not spoken, but insisted upon, appeared in my mind. Why? Why are you here? Why us? I answered the way my training pushed me to, with observations, with data. I pictured the station schematics, recited the last telemetry, the time since last contact, the fuel reserves, my pulse. They absorbed it the way a computer processes input, then pushed something back, a concept made of patterns. Survival. Not explicitly ours or theirs, but a negotiation of conditions. They wanted to know how living things adapt, how consciousness persists in changing environments. That was the language they understood, parameters, thresholds, responses. Days, if they were days, passed. The chamber showed me no sunrises, no clocks. My sense of time slipped. I was made to experience extremes. Intense cold without frost, pressure so high my teeth ached, stretches of absolute calm where my mind filled with the hum of my own failing instruments. Sometimes I glimpsed the exterior through a window in the chamber. The hull of the craft was a living lattice, not solid but shifting, like a jellyfish's bell, translucencies revealing inner lights and structures I could not name. Once I thought I saw another human figure suspended in a distant compartment, mouth open in an O, eyes rolled back. The sight drove a panic so sharp I felt my ribcage tear. I screamed without sound and banged on the chamber wall until the vibration ran through me like a tuning fork. The beings reacted not with malice but with attention. The projection of my family returned, then a different image, the face of my commander, pale, the station drifting. Guilt flooded me. Had my absence endangered them? Had something been taken from the station? The projection answered with a simulation of the station lit by emergency beacons, 2 crew members floating, working frantically at a console. I felt helplessness crush me. In that helplessness, a small, stubborn part of me, the trained engineer, the man who could fix oxygen scrubbers in half an hour with duct tape and prayer, began to fight back. I concentrated on the laws of motion, on reaction and counterreaction. If they could probe my memories, perhaps I could use my own mind as a tool. I focused on a single technique from survival training, repetitive, banal data recollection to anchor time. My mind recited instrument readouts, dates, the names of every wrench and socket on board. The chamber hummed in response and a new projection flickered, tools. They showed me hands, not human hands but appendages with delicate, precise fingers, handling a tiny instrument like a surgeon. For a nanosecond their hands mimicked mine exactly. In that instant I realized they weren't only observers. They learned by imitation. If they could learn, perhaps they could be taught. So I began to teach. Not words, my speech was useless, but sequences, cause and effect. I created simple experiments inside my head. Open valve, oxygen rises. Close valve, oxygen drops. Each cycle I made them watch until the pattern became undeniable. Slowly, the chamber's temperature stabilized when I imagined stabilizing it. Pressure steadied when I imagined the correct vents opening. It was as if they were running a simulation based on my inputs and adjusting their systems according to the outputs. The feeling gave me a sliver of leverage. With leverage came bargaining. I pushed at the simplest human plea I could: connection. I fed them images of laughter, of shared meals, of the small rituals that glued people together. They responded by projecting a scene of their own assembly. Not hostile but ritualistic arrangements of light and pattern that had the cadence of prayer. The exchange felt profound, a first-handed mutual recognition. In the flow of that exchange, they finally revealed their intent more clearly. We were a sample, yes, but also a bridge. Their technology, it showed me, was running low on a resource I could barely conceive of: variations in neural chemistry that arose in human brains. The unpredictability of human decision-making itself seemed to be something they harvested, not to harm but to seed patterns in their own networks. They needed variability to avoid collapse, and we produced it in abundance. Fear, love, grief, stubbornness. The revelation was both mesmerizing and monstrous. I had become a living repository. But then came the darker image. A map of sites on Earth, not random but targeted. Antennas, data centers, places where human culture collected and concentrated. Their projections suggested they were not unobservant. They had been careful, patient, and now more active. My stomach turned. If they manipulated patterns on a global scale, were we still in control of our own fate? Panic rose again, but this time tempered by a new thought. If they could learn from me, perhaps they could learn restraint. I resolved to teach them the most human thing I knew could bend a being toward mercy: empathy. I reached inward and forced my mind to the hardest memory I had. My partner's last smile before launch, a face full of faith. I let the memory flood them until the chamber stung with the sensation of shared vulnerability. They shivered, if what they were had the capacity for shivering, and for the first time I felt pity reflected back at me like a mirror. The chamber dimmed, and for a long stretch nothing happened. Then the most unexpected thing of all. I heard a sound, faint at first, not in my ears but inside my head. A pattern of clicks that resolved into rhythm. It was music, not like any music I'd known, layered with harmonics that made my chest ache. As it played, the projection of Earth rotated slowly, and a narrow beam of light extended from the craft to the station. My heart raced. Hope flared. Were they returning me? Were they offering a choice? Before I could answer, the chamber shuddered and the projection scrambled, like a signal interrupted. Panic surged, and with it a final image burned into me. My commander's voice, fragmented but clear, calling my name over a dead channel. I tried to grab that voice, to cling to it, but the chamber swallowed it whole. Then everything went black. No light, no image, no sound. Only the feeling of being between breaths, waiting for the next move. When the blackness finally thinned, it did so like someone lifting a veil. Not with fanfare but with the irritatingly slow inevitability of sunrise. I blinked and the chamber was gone. My face pressed to cold metal and the docking hatch of the station swung open above me. Alarms were blaring, sharp, mechanical, deeply human, and fluorescent lights that I recognized as being painfully ordinary flooded the module. I was back in my suit, the pressure seal tight around my neck, the radio in my helmet screaming a chorus of automated checks. My hands fumbled for the release latch like a man waking from anesthesia, and when the hatch cycled fully I heard voices. Rapid, clipped, Russian words spliced with the tethered English of mission control. And then my commander's face filled the doorway, hair matted, eyes wide with raw, unreadable emotion. Andre. His voice broke over the name, and for the first time since they started their projections I felt the world align. I tried to answer but my throat rebelled. The tongue that tasted station coffee and vodka and the iron tang of recycled air felt foreign. The med bay was chaos. Engineers and flight surgeons working with a speed I'd only ever admired from mission briefings. My crewmate, Lena, held a handheld scanner to my temple and barked questions into a recorder. My chrono readouts were fragmentary, but the station clocks all agreed. Only 37 minutes had passed since I was taken. 37 minutes. In that sliver of time, I had lived a lifetime. The medical team ran tests, glued patches to skin, inserted IVs. They read my vitals aloud like prayers and didn't seem to believe the numbers matched the man beneath. No hypoxia, no decompression, no trauma. One doctor repeated it like a mantra. How is that possible? I could only stare at the ceiling panels and remember the chamber, the way their projections had sifted through my life as if it were a specimen. My commander sat beside my cot and took my hand, and for an instant I had to remind myself he was the same man I'd trained with for a decade, the same steady voice through every simulation. But his grip trembled. "Mission Control wants a statement," he said. "They want telemetry, timestamps, everything. They're pulling feeds now." I swallowed and the words from the chamber rose, stubborn and dangerous. The map of targeted sites, the hint that these beings had been patient observers of Earth. I felt the responsibility of what I'd seen press on my ribs as heavily as any restraint harness. I could tell them, spill everything and risk mass panic, or I could bury those images and continue to live inside the narrow safety of known protocols. I chose neither, at least at first. The briefings that followed were sterile and surreal. In a command module that smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee, men and women in crisp shirts and tired faces asked me precise, surgical questions. Describe the object's shape. Did you experience loss of time? Were there any other witnesses? I answered as a cosmonaut, data first, emotion buried. I described the hull's translucence, the lights like veins, the way the chamber had pulsed with an internal logic. I lied in the smallest way I could manage. When they pressed for the effect on my mind, I said only that I'd experienced visual hallucinations consistent with sensory overload. They bought it or pretended to. Later, alone in a sleep module that had become a confessional, I allowed myself the private truth. They did not merely observe. They had taken something. I felt it as an absence more than an injury, a hollow place beneath my breastbone that did not ache with pain but with a patient, gnawing vacancy. Weeks passed and we resumed routines because that was what we were trained to do. Experiments, maintenance, data dumps. On Earth, the press conferences began, and I watched them through the feed with a jaundiced curiosity. Terms were invented, softened, anomalous contact, foreign object. The public would be told versions of events that fit into stories people could sleep with. I learned quickly that institutions hunger for narratives that stabilize markets and elections and sleep schedules. They did not want the jagged edge of the truth. Meanwhile, the thing that had been done to me kept revealing itself in small, private ways. I would wake with melodies lodged behind my teeth, those harmonic clicks from the chamber that no human composer had written. I would find myself understanding, for a breath, the arcane schematics they had shown me, able to visualize bending vectors in 3 dimensions the way someone might tally apples. Once, during an EVA, my glove went numb for a moment and my hand moved with a precision that surprised me. I had repaired a failed panel in minutes that would have taken me an hour before. The novelty was intoxicating and terrifying. I tested these gifts like a scientist, subtle experiments when no one was watching. I would think of a sequence, and the suit's microprocessors would respond with uncanny efficiency. I cataloged each success and each failure in a private log, knowing that honesty might get me classified as unstable. Then came the night when Lena found me in the observation module, staring at Earth with a look she'd later describe as lost. She sat beside me in the cramped space, and without ceremony I told her what I'd seen, everything, because withholding it felt like theft. She listened, eyes fixed on the curve of the planet, and when I finished she did something I hadn't expected. She laughed, a brittle sound, and then she cried. "We are not alone?" she whispered, and the laugh turned into pained incredulity. Who would believe us? The question hung between us like a fragile antenna. We were alone at once, and at once not. 2 witnesses with a burden neither could explain to the world without becoming spectacles. Our privacy lasted only hours. The next day, Mission Control convened an emergency teleconference. They were not interested in the careful human dialogue Lena and I had shared. They were interested in containment. "We have identified anomalies in your neural scans," the flight surgeon said over the link, voice calm and professional. "There are signatures we cannot currently classify. You too will undergo further tests, and we will be limiting your public statements." The language of authority slid over us like a glove. Resentment flared, mine hot and animal, but there was also fear, a deeper certainty that whatever had happened in that chamber had wider consequences. The mission changed tone after that. Instruments were recalibrated. Cameras were repositioned to cover blind spots. We were told to ignore the observation module at night. They increased the cadence of telemetry to Earth. It all felt like dressing a wound in gauze and deciding the world could sleep. I did not sleep. At the apex of my isolation, the chamber's memory returned in a way I could not explain. A single projection, brief and so precise it felt like a surgical incision through the fabric of my days. It was not of the ship or of my life, but of a place on Earth. A small, unremarkable field ringed by pines. Coordinates burned into my vision like a tattoo. The projection's certainty left me no doubt. Something of theirs had been placed there. The image did not show a device in the conventional sense. It was more like a node, a lattice of light threaded through soil and root, camouflaged by normality. If their patterning required nodes on Earth, then their reach was not just observational but infrastructural. I kept the coordinates secret at first, because secrecy felt like the only thing I could offer in return for the theft of my nights. But secrets live poorly in the company of too few people. Lena found the scrawl in my private log and traced it with a trembling finger. She did not flinch when I told her to forget it. Instead, she said the kind of sentence that presses one forever toward decision. If they are seeding nodes, then they are preparing for something. Either we stop it or we become part of it. Her resolve lit me like a flare. We both knew what would follow. Either we would go down, together, to that field and dig until our hands bled, or we would report and watch the world bite down on the truth and twist it into panic. We had to make a choice, and the station, for all its orbital detachment, had become too small a place to bear it. The choice haunted me for the remainder of that mission, pressing against every hour like an invisible weight. When our return capsule finally buckled into the atmosphere and the violent reentry fire turned the windows into sheets of molten orange, I gritted my teeth and thought only of that field, those coordinates, the node pulsing beneath pine roots like a heart the world did not yet know it carried. The landing was rough, harder than most, and when they pulled me out into the open air of Kazakhstan, I felt the press of gravity and secrecy crash down at once. Debriefings blurred together. Doctors in white coats, officers with sharpened questions, intelligence officials who watched me not with curiosity but suspicion. I gave them data, not revelation. I gave them telemetry, not the truth. But inside my mind, the projection replayed, unyielding. Weeks later, after the parades were done and the medals placed around my neck like leaden collars, I slipped away. No entourage, no cameras. Just a train ticket and a backpack heavy with silence. I told no one, not even Lena, though her eyes searched me in our last shared glance, as if she already knew where my path bent. The field was harder to find than I expected. Coordinates on paper feel clean, but on foot among endless trees every path looks the same. When at last I broke into the clearing, I froze. It was exactly as shown. Unremarkable, a scatter of wild grass, the air thick with resin. Yet at the center, when I pressed my palm to the earth, the hum rose, not sound but vibration threading bone. I dug. Nails tore, dirt packed under them, sweat blinded me. Hours passed until my spade struck something not stone, not root. It glowed faintly, a lattice of light woven into crystalline strands, pulsing in slow rhythm. The node. My chest tightened with the certainty that if I touched it fully, everything would change. My body, my mind, perhaps even the balance of our world. My training screamed to report it, to catalog, to retreat. But my heart, swollen with the residue of their projections, knew this was more than evidence. This was a seed. The music returned, soft, harmonic clicks threading through the air, though no creature made them. I realized, trembling, that it wasn't only communication. It was invitation. I could destroy it, bury it, detonate it, sever their reach. Or I could answer it, let it thread me into something larger than I could comprehend. I knelt there in the dirt, staring at the node's slow, patient light, and I knew this was no longer their experiment. It was my decision, mine alone, one human standing at the cusp of a truth too vast to fit into debriefings or press releases. And as the wind stirred the pines above me and the node pulsed in my palm, I finally understood the question they had carved into my skull back in the chamber. Why? And with the weight of the world pressing down and the stars silently watching, I drew in a breath and whispered my answer, knowing that once given, it could never be taken back.